Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenny Peppers. I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar, Youth Justice Leadership Institute informational webinar. It's a second session. And before we get started, I would like to run through a few things. So first of all, everyone is muted. But if you have any questions during the webinar, you can type your question in the question box, which is like at the bottom right on your control panel. And when we get to the question section, you can also raise your hand, and then I will unmute you one by one. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on NJJN website next week. And we have today with us Diana Onley Campbell, who is the coordinator of the Youth Justice Leadership Institute from the National Juvenile Justice Network. She's going to tell you about the information about what the Institute is and how to apply to become a fellow and answer any questions you may have. We also have with us today Nayamka Shakura. She is a senior community advocate from the Southern Poverty Law Center. She's also our 2017 Institute alum. So without further ado, let me pass this to Diana.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. We do these informational webinars to give folks an opportunity to hear directly about the Institute and also to directly ask questions. So I'm going to actually yammer at you a good deal, but we will definitely leave time for your questions. Nayamka has not joined us yet, but she will shortly.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Hey. Hi, Nayamka. Do you want to go on and say a few things since you're here? Go ahead.
Sure. Hey, everybody. So glad that you all were able to check in today. My name is Nayamka Shakura. As Jenny mentioned, I am a 2017-2018 Institute alum. I work at the Southern Poverty Law Center as a senior community advocate, and just wanted to give you all sort of a brief intro and overview of sort of why I joined the program and why I think this is such an important program. So a couple of my colleagues did this program over the years that it's been available, and they definitely recommended it to me. And the reason they recommended it to me is because they really believed in the leadership development and the mentoring piece to it. And so when I decided to apply, I didn't know much about, sort of where we were going with it, and I put my project together. But when I tell you all, the leadership development and the mentoring piece was probably the most, the best thing that happened to me at that time. I was in a place where I was trying to figure out my place in the movement, and whether or not I wanted to continue doing this work for an organization, reevaluating the type of work that I wanted to do, and trying to move to a place where the people closest to the problem are the ones developing the solutions. And this program was really helped recenter me in that and remind me that as a Black queer woman that my voice needed to be central in a lot of conversations that I felt like I wasn't the expert in. And so if you get nothing else from this conversation, nothing else from this institute, if you become a fellow, the leadership development and the mentoring and the recentering of self is probably the most important piece of this institute. And I know Diana is going to get into some of the technical aspects of what it means to apply and what it means to be a fellow, but I'm here to sort of share with you all my experience and the things that I gained and the leadership opportunities that have come since I completed the program.
Great. Thanks, Nayamka. I will say a little bit before I get into the Institute. The Institute is a project of the National Juvenile Justice Network. And as you can see in the slide, we feel we are the leaders of a national movement. We are a membership organization, and our members are individuals and organizations in 43 states in the District of Columbia. And through our work, we seek to shrink the youth justice systems and make what remains fair, equitable, and effective. So when folks come into the Institute, they're also coming into the National Juvenile Justice Network. I want to start by talking a little bit about the origins of the Institute. In 2009, NJJN was having its annual conference, and during that event, one of the attendees, who is still a member of NJJN, stood up and said, "How come?" I'm paraphrasing, but how come almost everyone in this room is white when we know that the way the systems operate, it's black and brown youth who bear the heaviest burden. And with that began the effort on the part of NJJN to change who was in the room. The Institute is the outcome of that beginning declaration. Our original vision for the Institute was that it would be for people of color, family members, and system survivors. And due to funder stipulations, we kind of had to make it more about people who are actually working in the field. But what we do in our selection process is we give particular preference and look very favorably at folks who are also family members or system survivors. We were able to do a year of planning in 2010, which we were very fortunate. Very few folks get to have that. So we planned for a year, and we took in our first cohort in 2011, and we have welcomed a new cohort every year since then, and this will be actually our 9th cohort of folks. I do want to talk a bit about the structure and kind of how it works, and then I'll say a bit more about how to apply. It is a year-long and unpaid program. We have 2 in-person sessions, one in September and one in April. The cost of travel and getting there and the lodging and food for it are paid for by the Institute. So the cost of those in-person sessions does not fall on the fellow. We do monthly check-ins and monthly presentations that are related to the curriculum components. And our curriculum is essentially built on 3 components: leadership fundamentals, youth justice system overview, and advocacy skills development. And as Nayamka said, we are very, very serious about that leadership development part. And we take a little bit different approach to it than some other leadership development programs. But those are the 3 components, and the monthly presentations all relate to that. We are very committed to and interested in peer engagement and peer support within the cohort. There is a registration fee for fellows, but that fee is on it's on a sliding scale. And the registration should never be seen as an obstacle to someone participating in the Institute, because we offer very generous scholarships to anyone who needs them. You'll also be able, as a fellow, to engage with the broader NJJN community. Fellows are added to our online communities and our discussion lists. You will also be able to attend and participate in any of the webinars that NJJN presents to its members throughout your institute year. We do pair each fellow with a mentor, and that process will happen soon after someone is accepted into the institute. There is a moderate amount of reading that is expected of the fellows. We started out the first year expecting way too much reading from our inaugural cohort. But one of the things that we definitely do is we listen to the feedback that we get from the fellows, and we adjust so that it can still be a useful and enjoyable experience for them. We do have completion requirements. It's a fairly rigorous program. We expect folks to make a true and real commitment once they've been invited in and accept. And then, to really hold themselves to the commitment once it's been made. Folks who finish their institute year completely or successfully, and at this point we now have 66 alumni, and if you are good at math in your head, you can figure out there have been a few people who have not finished. But mostly people do finish, and they finish successfully and go into our alumni program. In the alumni program, you are invited to become a full member of NJJN, and that means that you can then serve on committees and working groups and that kind of thing, and you get invited to that annual conference that I spoke about, and you can also receive financial support to attend that conference. We do quarterly presentations to our alumni, and many of them hold places of leadership now within NJJN. So that's kind of the history and the broad strokes of the institute itself and the alumni program. Now I want to talk a bit about the application process. So it's a pretty competitive process, and you'll see there on the screen a shot of the page on our website where you'll find all of the application materials that you'll need. And I will say that our application can be a bit time consuming because we do require a project proposal, but the instructions for that are pretty straightforward, and we don't ask for a 10-page thesis or anything like that, but that we do want to know what it is you hope to do during your year. But it's a fairly straightforward, pretty, we don't ask you to do algebraic equations or anything as part of the application. It should be something that everybody can successfully complete. I will mention that the deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, April 29th, because we're very serious about that deadline for the sake of fairness to all applicants. We don't accept any applications or parts of applications past that deadline. It tends to be a kind of competitive pool On average, we have about 25 applications, though this year there are some signs that there may be more, but we average 25 applications for 10 slots. When an application comes in, we do an initial screening just to make sure that all of the pieces are there, that they are usable, and that they have arrived before the deadline. After that initial screening, we send each application out to be reviewed, to be read, reviewed, and assessed by 4 people in our reader pool. So each application is read by 4 readers plus me as the coordinator, and we give them and no 4 readers are all seeing the same applications, I should say, also. We give each reader about a month in which to complete their part of the process. They then send, and we provide them with a tool so that to the extent that we're able to do it, everybody is looking at the same indicators and assessing them in the same way. So the tool is meant to guarantee that as best as we can. So after they've done that, they send back their scores and rankings for the people that they looked at. And at that point, it is a mathematical exercise. We simply average out all the scores, all the ranks, and anywhere from the top 13 to 15 applications are then invited to do a 30-minute phone interview with the interview committee. And that committee is usually comprised of the coordinator, me, and 2 alumni. And usually it's the alumni reps for the year, but it may be another person who is also an alum. Once we've finished those phone interviews, a final decision is made about the 10 people that we will invite to be in the institute, and folks have to actively accept that invitation. All of this is usually done anywhere between beginning and mid-June. So that's kind of the overall process. And Nyanka, did you want to add anything to what I just said?
No, I think you covered it. The only thing that I'll add in project development is so I learned about the Institute. Well, I was told or asked by one of my colleagues to apply to the Institute the weekend before the application was due. And so I started working on my project over that weekend, had a solid project, a solid plan. Read that project to my spouse, and my spouse was like, "They don't even sound like you." And so it was a concrete project, it was a concrete plan, but it wasn't something that I was necessarily interested in, more so than I thought it was something that the Institute would be interested in seeing. And so yes, center your project around young folks, center your project around some type of juvenile justice, but make the project your own, and make it something that you want to do, something that's creative, something that's valuable for you, because that will also help you be successful throughout the Institute. So that's the one thing I'll add.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and since we're talking a bit about the projects, I will say that there are things that we are looking for. One, we're looking for something that is trying to address a systemic change, and I emphasize that because sometimes people, the projects that someone proposes in their application is actually not an advocacy or a systemic project, and it's more of a either a direct service project or an individual advocacy project for individuals. And those are of great importance and great value, though they are not the things that we are looking for in the projects that fellows would do. So I do want to make that stipulation. So I think we've reached the point where we can open it up for questions. We love questions. We like to help people understand what it is that we're doing and what it is we are hoping for.
Yes, Diana. So we don't have any questions so far. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand, and I will unmute you. All right. All right. Look at that. We have Jennifer. Thank you. All right, Jennifer, I'm going to unmute you, and then you can go ahead. Yeah, please ask your question.
Yes, awesome. Hi, thank you for holding this webinar. A quick question I have is about the application.
Sure.
When the reviewers are looking over the application, could you share what some of the possible indicators are that they're using to rate and scale and rank the application?
Sure, that's an excellent question. So when we, what's in the tool, that's probably the best thing to do. In the tool, we ask them to look at the applicant's desire to lead. We ask them to look at the applicant's connection to most impacted communities. We ask them to look at the applicant's advocacy project, looking to make sure that it is something that has a systemic focus and that it has been thought through, and that it is something that appears to be, it could possibly be completed within the Institute's time frame. And we also ask them to look at the applicant's ability to successfully complete the Institute year. And there are a few more things that I'm not remembering right now off the top of my head, Jennifer, but those are kind of the main things that we ask them to look at.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on that last indicator, ability to complete the project. Are you looking at institutional supports the applicant has, previous experience, or just a feeling that you're getting of the applicant's ability once, reading through the application and possibly through the interview later?
What we are primarily looking at for that indicator is the nominations, because we ask the nominators to address that specifically. So that's where we're getting that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have the question from Alexis. I'm going to read out to you.
Okay.
The first one is, can you give me an example of past projects that were successful?
Yeah. See, I'm hesitating, Alexis, mostly just because I don't want to mislead anyone into thinking this kind of project gets me in, because we've had all kinds of projects. We've had people do stopping a jail. We've had people creating a state-wide organization. We've had folks create a court watch system. So I'm trying to, because I think what you're trying to get at is what makes a successful project in terms of the application. And if that's, what's kind of underlying your question, I can say this. It's the projects, one, that we can assess as having been thought through. That's one thing. And I think Nyamka's point about it being the thing that you really want to do also is important, because it tends to come through if, for example, someone is proposing something only because they believe their job will allow them to do this particular kind of work. There's nothing wrong with that. But if the person's enthusiasm for the project is not there, it tends to come through. I know I'm not really answering this as directly as you might want. I'd suggest this, if Alexis, go to the site and you can actually go through and see what everybody did, if that'll help you. I'm struggling to really pull out something that I think is going to be useful because they're all so incredibly different.
Thank you. And the other question from Alexis as well, are the retreat dates already set for September and April?
No, we're working on September now, and we can't work on April until January of 2020.
And that's
because of the site that we use.
Yes. And I'll add, the program is something that you have to definitely be committed to. And if you think that you're going to have some things that are going to be pulling you and that you won't have the time to dedicate to this year, then that's something to consider as well. And we come up with group dates and different things like that to make sure that we try to be accommodating to the entire cohort. But everybody's expected to be at those in-persons. We're expected to be on those 2 calls a month. So think about if you do have the time to really commit to this, because that is something that is a factor in this as well.
Right. Thank you, Nyanka.
All right, we have another question from Joshua. Hold on for a second. Okay, so what is the time commitment to the program in terms of hours per week?
It does vary, Joshua, because a lot of the time commitment depends on what your project is, right? But from our end of things, there are the 2 remote activities each month, and each of those is at least an hour. There are some peer group exercises that, and really it's only a couple. So the main things that are going to be pulling on a fellow's time are his or her projects. And that, the time for it varies depending on what your project is. I'm sorry, I wish I could be more specific, but that's the honest truth. We have our 2 hours, our 2 hours a month, and that plus the hour that you need to be engaged each month with your mentor, plus whatever else your project requires. That's the best answer I can give you.
Okay, thank you, Dinah. So we're still waiting for more questions, but I have a personal question for, just a quick question for Nyanka. What's your favorite part of being, part of the institute?
For me, it was the fellowship. Being around 9 other people who were doing similar work, who experienced this work similar to me, was very empowering, very helpful. Again, as a person who's experienced these issues in multiple stages and multiple aspects of my life, there's sometimes this sort of space that doesn't exist in certain organizations for people who work on the work and people who have gone through the work that we're now working on, right? And to be around people who had similar experiences, who had like minds, where we could sort of Okay, so somebody else gets this, right? Was a beautiful experience for me, and it was re-energizing, right? To know that we were all a part of a process to put us out there in this work even more, to build us as leaders, to make sure that we have a community of people that when we are frustrated, when we are tired, when we need guidance, when we need to be re-empowered, to be re-energized, we had this group of folks that we can always go to and turn to. And I still have those group of people who I can always go to and turn to, including my mentor. So I guess community and fellowship is the best thing that I got out of this, for self and for, again, just the people around me too.
Thank you, Nayanka. That was awesome. I would apply, but I'm working for Gigi already. So the next question is from Tanisha. What kind of ratings are required?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that, Tanisha. We have very few required readings. The first required reading that we have is a book called Strengths-Based Leadership. Every single fellow who has come through the Institute has read that book. We start there because maybe you can tell from Nyamka and how we've been talking, the leadership development part of this is primary for us. So we start from there and we emphasize that throughout. So that's one book. And then the other book that we require is a biography of a social change maker. And that book varies from year to year. We switch it up. But we read about all kinds of folks who have been parts of significant social change. We provide a bunch of other books to you, but those are the only two that we require you to read. And that's because we know that folks have to spend a great deal of time probably reading for their projects or that kind of thing.
Sounds good. The next question we have from Yamanda. So does the program target early career juvenile justice professionals and or young people who have encountered the juvenile justice system? If yes, how early in the career? I repeat the question. Mm-hmm. Does this program target early or juvenile justice professionals early in their career and or young people who have encountered the juvenile justice system?
Right. Let's see. The best answer I think I can give is that anyone 18 or older is eligible age-wise to be a fellow. And we've had folks as young as I think the youngest person came in at age 20 and turned 21 during the year. So we really try. We don't really frame it in terms of how long somebody has been in the work. What we're looking for, I guess, is the best way for me to try to articulate this. What we're looking for is folks who have had enough experience in trying to bring systemic change, either on this issue or some other, that they have a sense of what that looks like, and they want to lead. They want to be the person out in front, and so sometimes that's somebody who's just starting out, kind of. But we've had folks who are, been in the field for a long time, but had not reached the point of recognized leadership that they wanted to reach, if that makes sense. I know this is probably not really a direct answer, but it's honestly the best answer I can give you in terms of that question, because it just has varied over time, and we kind of leave it open so that it can be.
Thank you, Diana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. We have all the questions answered so far.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have any more questions, we still have about maybe 10-ish minutes to answer.
Yeah, while we're waiting, folks may be crafting their questions. One question that I usually get, and I forgot to say this earlier, one of the things that sometimes usually people ask is, so what are you looking for? I mean, who makes the best applicant, right? It's a little bit hard to say, but I can say this. As we are looking at each application, we are trying to assess, is this someone who wants to bring systemic change? Is this someone who wants to be the leader and with all that entails, right? And is this someone who's going to be able to meet the requirements of the institute? Those are the three big buckets that we are using when we're trying to assess each application.
Awesome. We have another question from Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
What have fellows found to be the most difficult or challenging part of the fellowship? For those who did not successfully complete the program, what were some of the challenges that made them unsuccessful?
That's a good question. I would say that if I was going to pick one thing, it would be that they most likely did not do a good assessment of their time, energy, resources that they were going to be able to devote to it. And yeah, I would say that that's it. People just didn't exactly assess well enough what they were going to have to commit to it. And it's unfortunate. I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's unfortunate because we actually go to great lengths to try to help people work that out and figure that out. We don't just go, oh, that's too bad. Tough luck for you. No, when someone, and Nyamka can speak to this a little bit too, but if somebody's encountering a difficulty in terms of trying to, get their advocacy project going, or they're having a hard time making those monthly events that we require, we try to work with people to figure out how to fix that for them, right? How to resolve it. And for the folks, I will say honestly, for the folks who did not complete, they were unable to allow us to assist them in that way.
I think
and I don't know, Nyamka, you may have more to say about it.
Yeah, I know. I'm fortunate. My whole cohort, we started together and we finished together. But I know that during the course of the year, a lot of us had difficulties with different aspects of our project, and whether that was difficulty in that were sort of in our control or difficulties outside of our control. Like for example. When I started the Institute, I was a team of about 3 or 4 people. Actually, I think when I applied, I was a team of about 3 or 4 people. And by the time the Institute really got started, I was a team of 1 at my job. So a lot of things shifted for me and changed for me. And I had to sort of change and update my project as a result. And so throughout that process, I just continued to be in communication with Diana, like a leader would have to when things come up at, an organization that I might have been running. I just stayed in constant communication, was honest about what was going on, again, and allowed Diana to help me through some of those hiccups to sort of get myself back on track. Then, outside of stuff that was happening sort of internally, ran into issues where, you know, we waited too long to go back to this community. And so now, you know, we can't get the community to respond. And again, reached out to Diana, I'm like, I'm having this trouble, or reached back out to my cohort because some of the things that we experienced, we were all sort of experiencing, right? Couldn't get buy-in from the community, couldn't get buy-in from our organization, was trying to go this way, but we're running into these barriers. And a part of those group calls and those group chats and the trainings that we go through help us navigate some of those issues. But again, it's being open to the fact that these things are going to change, because it really shows you throughout the year how hard it is sometimes to move your work, especially when we're talking about systemic work, and how you sort of have to ebb and flow and be open to the fact that things may change. But as things are changing, it is important to communicate with folks. It's important to stay in contact. So I think for me, again, it's definitely being, again, open, ready, available, but understanding that checking in, being accountable, and those leadership qualities, right, those leadership traits, they will be sort of in your face in a way that they haven't been before, and challenge you to really use those things. And speaking to the answered a while back, but like the strengths-based leadership book, right? You're going to learn about a few different leadership styles. You're going to learn about your own leadership style, and you'll start to see those things manifest themselves throughout the course of this project and throughout the course of the Institute. So I think success in it is you, and you being willing to, again, if you haven't been in that type of leadership role, prepare yourself to become that leader and be held accountable as that leader throughout.
Thank you, Nyamka. Thank you. I appreciate that. And let me I do want to just say, I want to explain a little bit. Really, the thing that caused, I think, the people who didn't finish to not finish was they didn't believe it when we said, we will work with you. We will work with you. We will do whatever we can to make sure that you can finish completely. But you have to, as Nyamka said, keep the lines of communication open, because really, the difficulties that those folks were facing weren't really different than many of the difficulties folks who did finish successfully were facing. The difference was they didn't talk to me, right? They didn't tell me. And that was a huge factor, I think.
Great. Thank you so much.
We're almost done. I was just checking to see if there was one last question.
Yeah, looks like we have answered all the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, which is great. But if you have any more questions, you can always email Diana at njjn.org.
Yep, I am happy to have questions. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time to be on here with us. And go ahead, Jenny, whatever you wanted to say.
That's it. Nyamka, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say, and if you have any questions for me about what it was like, about the experience, you can definitely email Diana to get my contact information. I'm open to answer any questions you all may have.
And thank you, Nyamka, for being on here to talk with folks. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll be looking forward to your applications. And again, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll send it out next week. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.